Welcome back to our Strength for Service series. Today, I want to discuss a second roadblock to sustained service, not properly prioritizing how we spend our time and energy. One of the things that keep us spiritually stuck aren't necessarily bad things, but good things that we've prioritized over better things. I used the story of Martha and Mary when talking about perfectionism, and it's even more poignant when talking about priorities. Truly, my heart goes out to poor Martha. I think she just wanted many of the same positive things that we want: to run her household with efficiency, to serve great food to people, to make her guests comfortable, and to be able to rely on those closest to her to support that vision. It all seems so completely reasonable, and I totally understand her annoyance with Mary. It must have been such a shock when Jesus corrected her attitude rather than lecturing Mary. But notice his exact words: Mary has chosen the better part. What better part was Mary choosing? Essentially, she was prioritizing closeness with God over anything that could pull her time and attention away. Were there other things competing for her attention? Absolutely. But she was so captivated by the presence of her Savior that everything else faded into the background. Many times, we're not choosing between something good and something evil. That would actually be much easier. The challenge is choosing what is excellent over what is merely good. Martha wasn't sinning by serving. She was doing a good work by being hospitable and serving others. And yet, Jesus made it clear that her priorities were out of order. Naturally, that leads me to ask myself, am I characterized by choosing the better part? And that's according to how Jesus defines it. Or by following my own ambitions? A clean house, tidy garden beds, an empty email inbox, a from-scratch dinner, a consistent exercise routine. Each of these various pursuits is virtuous in and of itself, but all of these competing interests, when they're added together, they consume so much of my time that abiding with God can easily get crowded out unless I've intentionally carved out non-negotiable space for connecting with Him. In Matthew 6, verse 24, Jesus taught that no one can serve two masters. The immediate context is money, but the principle applies more broadly. Our hearts cannot give two things equal ultimate allegiance. When he uses the words hate and despise how we'll feel about the other master, it carries a comparative sense of regarding one thing as lesser than another. So let's paraphrase the verse in a way that's both personal and lighthearted, using my favorite hobby, pickleball. Melissa cannot equally serve pickleball and God. For either she will love God less than she loves pickleball, or she will be loyal to God more than she regards pickleball. So let's say I accept an invitation to an 8 a.m. pickleball match to beat the summer heat. This sounds completely reasonable, but 8 to 8:30 is usually my prayer and study time. I don't think it's strategically wrong to play the sport before the heat of the day, but do I care enough about connecting with God to reschedule that quiet time? Or is time with God the thing that I drop from my schedule when other opportunities arise? How we spend our time reveals what we really think is important. If everything kind of equally takes first place, then nothing truly does, including God. Elevating dozens of virtuous tasks to equally high status is a great way to work ourselves into a frenzy and end up in burnout. If you could see the Melissa of 5 years ago, you'd see a woman who believed the hundreds of tasks filling every second of every day were all important. I couldn't find a single endeavor I was willing to give up. It was a mathematically impossible situation that relied too often on the "I'll sleep when I'm dead" mantra, and eventually my health crashed. I had to admit that the road I was on wasn't helping me become the mom, wife, and Christian I wanted to be. I was trying in vain to serve too many masters, and I was carrying a burden that Jesus tells us we don't need to carry. I finally felt desperate enough to seek out the help of a life coach who specialized in helping women with exactly that struggle. The very first thing she asked me to do was to write down my top 7 priorities in order. It was so hard to limit myself to just 7. By the end of the exercise, I had to make the difficult decision to toss overboard some uses of my time that were comparatively less important, creating space for what mattered most. I was finally accepting the hard truth that my time was finite and I truly couldn't do it all. As women, we tend to juggle many things at once, but there's a limit to how many balls even a skilled juggler can keep in the air at the same time. So what are your most important 5 to 10 areas to nourish in this season? And are you willing to set down some less important balls, at least for a time, to focus on the ones that you've identified as most important? Evaluate them by their fruits and be willing to drop what is not producing very much right now. You can always pick those balls up again when your season of life changes. Personally, I found that playing hymns at church was costing me a tremendous amount of practice time. I'm not a very good pianist, so even after all that practice, I still played poorly during the service, and I often ended up with a stress migraine from all of it. I kept this up for 15 years because stepping away from any area of service felt like I was failing God and the congregation. But once my coach helped me understand the need to prioritize, I realized that practicing piano wasn't bearing enough good fruit to justify keeping it in my schedule while I was raising young kids. So I set down that ball a few years ago, and the congregation has survived just fine. Maybe I'll pick that ball up again when I'm in a less demanding season of life. Hopefully, I've inspired you to join me in evaluating whether the way you spend your time truly aligns with your stated values. This week, will you embrace your inner Martha by letting your long to-do list rule your life? Or will you choose the better part by prioritizing the things that have eternal value? I'll be back next week to talk about the need for healthy boundaries in our service.